Chapter 6. Nectar's Genesis. 6 months earlier. Will you please make a noise with your mouth that indicates we're traveling back in time 6 months? Louder. Louder. Now do a sort of swishy noise. Now quack like a duck. Now make a noise like a seal being run over by a combine harvester. I can make you do anything. Get on with the story. Clive Meek, the most brilliant young researcher at Ribbon Robotics, sat in his laboratory with his head in his hands. Outside, night was falling, and the yellowish glow of a street lamp shining through the blinds cast striped shadows across the back of his lab coat. The room was silent, except for a blatting, buzzing noise that came from a large glass jar surrounded by wires and electrical circuits attached to it with black rubber pads. Without warning, the door burst open. "Well, Meek," heard the tall woman silhouetted in the doorway. "You promised me results by 6 o'clock. It's now 6:45. With time-telling like that, you could really see how this woman had risen to the very top of her profession, for this was Arabella Ribbon, head of the entire company. She flicked back her hair, stunning a passing fly.
I'm terribly sorry, Miss Ribbon,"
stammered the young man, struggling to his feet.
I calculated all the variables time and time again, but the sequencer just won't read them.
"You promised me that you could use the DNA of insects to create a new, more efficient kind of robot brain," hissed Arabella, conveniently summing up what was going on.
"And I've paid you very well for more than a year now. I want results. I don't care if you have to stay here all night. If I don't see some progress when I come into this office at 9 o'clock tomorrow morning, you're fired." Yes, of course, Miss Ribbon. Thank you,"
cringed Meek. The door slammed, and he slumped back into his chair. After a few minutes, he turned and tapped a few keys on an old-fashioned computer. Green numbers spooled upwards on the screen, and Meek narrowed his eyes. He rolled his chair over to the glass jar and peered inside. A single wasp was climbing up the side, fluttering its wings weakly.
"Why can't I read you?"
muttered Meek.
"What are you hiding from me? What goes on inside that insect's brain?"
Suddenly, a thought struck him, and he stood up abruptly.
"If the sequencer can't read your wasp mind, I wonder, can it read any brainwaves at all?"
he murmured. He detached 2 of the pads from the outside of the glass jar and clamped them to his own temples. The wasp buzzed angrily at the disturbance. Meek flicked a switch on the wall, and a low hum started up. He turned back to the computer and typed in a few numbers. The screen went blank, and then a single word appeared. Sequencing. But for a long time, nothing else happened.
"Let's increase the power, shall we?"
mused Meek, tapping in a few more numbers. Then, after another minute, a few more. The humming increased in volume, and the buzzing of the wasp grew more frantic.
"Still nothing,"
snapped the scientist, adjusting the rubber pads on his head and tapping more buttons.
"Maximum power!"
The hum became a scream, which mingled with the frenzied drumming of the wasp's wings. The electrical circuits attached to the glass jar glowed orange, and Clive Meek shrieked in pain. There was a sharp crack, a bright flash, and all the lights in the building went out. Now, there was no sound. The glow of the streetlight fell on an empty desk, illuminating nothing but a slowly spinning plume of smoke as it rose from the burned husk of a wasp in the shattered remains of the glass jar. Arabella Ribbon once again displayed her excellent clock-reading skills by bossing through the door of Meek's laboratory at exactly 9 o'clock the following morning. She was greeted by 3 things. Firstly, the lingering scent of burned wasp, which is one of the worst smells, right up there with egg sandwiches and pee on a hot barbecue. Secondly, the sight of millions of pounds worth of electronic and computing equipment that had been broken and smashed into pieces, then mashed together into what could only be described as a nest. It filled the space between the workbench and the window, which still had the blinds drawn across it. And in the middle of that nest was sitting the third thing to greet her. It was wearing the tattered remains of Clive Meek's white lab coat, but this couldn't be the young robotics engineer she had been quite looking forward to having a really good shout at. Meek had been cowardly and craven. This person was sitting with his back to her, calmly humming, or more like buzzing, an eerie little tune. "Meek?" she said nervously.
Don't look so nervous,
drawled the thing in the nest.
I promised you results, and I think this is really going to blow your mind.
What do you mean, look nervous? Said Arabella, straightening her back and remembering just who was the boss around there. You can't even see me.
Oh, but I can see you, Bella. In fact, my vision has improved all round.
The man spun sharply in his chair, knocking over a conical flask and smashing it to pieces, which added to the drama. As he slowly rose to his feet, Arabella gasped. Whereas Clive Meek had two weedy-looking brown eyes, this creature had two enormous, bulging insect eyes. She could see her increasingly pale face reflected in them many times over. "What are you doing, Meek?" she shrieked as he advanced on her.
Meek? Meek? Clive Meek is no more. He's flown the hive, you might say.
Isn't it bees that live in a hive? You look more like a wasp, said Arabella.
Silence!
Roared the wasp.
You may have been queen around here, but it's time this swarm had a new leader.
Again, I think that's bees, began Arabella, but it was too late. The creature reached out towards her, and she saw with horror a sharp, glittering sting protruding from the inside of each wrist. He lunged at her before she had time to think about escaping, the stings thrusting out further with venom dripping from the tips. Luckily for us, Arabella Ribbon's scream of pure terror was cut short abruptly as the paragraph ended. We now ask you to fast forward 6 months, and I'd like you to indicate this by making a fast forwarding sound. To perform this accurately, you must do the following. Open the nearest window and shout at the top of your voice, "I am the king of the pineapple people." Oh, okay, hang on. I am the king of the pineapple people! There we go. Doesn't sound anything like a fast forward, but didn't it feel great? It did, yes. Anyway, Your Majesty, in many ways we are back to where we were a few pages ago, but this time, crucially, we now know how the evil nectar came to be, and you are now in charge of all pineapples. Congratulations. Let's continue.